have a very bookish video for you today. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the ACOTAR series as a non-fantasy reader. I'm also going to talk about the importance of switching genres as a reader and tips on how you can read more in today's video. Jennifer here, and welcome back to the Daily Connoisseur. This is a video about reading, but if you're new to the channel, I just wanted to introduce myself. I am an author as well. I write nonfiction books right now, and I have a Madame Chic series starting with lessons from Madame Chic. So if you're interested in nonfiction, I will leave my books down below. A few weeks ago, I shared that I was reading ACOTAR on Instagram. ACOTAR is short for A Court of Thorns and Roses. This is a series by Sarah J. Maas, and it is wildly popular. I've heard about it for years and always wanted to read it, but I had resistance because I am not a fantasy reader. So this review is going to be coming from my perspective as someone who's not into fantasy at all. Okay. Also, I'm not going to be giving any spoilers, so it's totally safe for you to watch this video, and I'm not going to be spoiling it for you. I'm just going to give my thoughts on the series. So I have read A Court of Thorns and Roses and the second one, A Court of Mist and Fury. Okay, so if you're only here for the review, you can check the timestamps down below and skip to the part where I talk about it. But before I do that, I just want to set up my reading history so you can kind of get a perspective of where I'm coming from. I have always been a mystery fan. That's like the main genre that I read. Started out when I was a kid, read Encyclopedia Brown, every Nancy Drew. Then I started on the hard stuff, which was Agatha Christie, okay? I call it the hard stuff just because it was like such an adult. Books were so adult, but I was reading them as a kid. I've read every Agatha Christie, some of them multiple times, like obsessed, okay? So I love Agatha Christie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I love Alexandra McCall Smith, Ashley Weaver, Charles Finch. These are some of my favorite mystery authors. I also like twisty page turners. So lately I've been reading Riley Sager, Frida McFadden, those types of books. So that's the backstory of my reading history. I love mysteries. I don't know what it is. I think it's because it is a puzzle. It's something to solve. It gives my brain like a challenge, you know? So I just have always been obsessed with them. And fun side note, some of you know this, but not many of you do. The first book I ever wrote was actually a mystery. And much like with Lessons from Madame Chic, I could not get a publisher. So I gave up on that, and then I wrote Lessons from Madame Chic, and the rest is history. But I do have ambition to return to fiction one day, pretty soon actually. The call is coming, okay? But anyway, so that's where I'm coming from. I love mysteries. But I do believe it's good to switch genres. So I do that. I read mysteries, but I also read romance every now and then. I'll read historical fiction, and then of course a bunch of nonfiction all the time. So I do mix it up a little bit, but I've never been that into fantasy. And I've always wanted to be into fantasy. I'm interested in things like this. I'll tell you about it why later. But for some reason, I have never been able to get into the books. Like I've started books, can't finish them. So all that to say that I heard so much about the ACOTAR series and I wanted to read it. But I knew that it was going to be slow. Like I was not going to be able to get into it that well because of my reading history. So I decided to listen to the audiobook of ACOTAR. It's true. Like it took me so long to get into this book. It took about the first 7 hours of listening to it. And I would listen to it in car rides. I would listen to it while I was doing housework. But I just wasn't into it. It was like a hard read for me. Now, this is not to say anything to criticize the author, Sarah J. Maas, because she is so talented. Like she creates these worlds that you immerse yourself in. So descriptive. So this is not at all a critique about the writing. This is like me trying to get into a new genre and not getting into it. But about 3/4 of the way through the book, something clicked and I was suddenly all in. And at that point, I wanted to switch from the audiobook to the physical book. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I got the first one, and I began to read it from where I left off. It was like chapter 20 or something. And I got so into it. And then from that moment on, it was like incredible. The book gets so good. Once you're into the world, once you accept everything, it's just amazing. I thought that the last quarter of the book was a complete showstopper. I mean, it was so good, and I couldn't put it down. And then I went and I bought the second one at Barnes & Noble, and this one I felt was even better. So the ACOTAR series is about Feyre. She's our hero. And I won't give too much away, but she is a human that goes into the fairy realm for reasons outside of her control. And it is, the first book anyway, is like a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It is that kind of, that archetype of Feyre being like Belle and Tamlin being like the Beast almost, okay? So she's in this world, in this house, against her will, and there's all of that going on. I won't go too much into it. But basically, I realized what I have a hard time with fantasy is establishing the rules of the world. So it's kind of like if you're playing chess or backgammon for the first time, like you're learning the rules. It's not really fun to play the games when you don't know the rules, right? But once you know the rules and you know how to play the game, it clicks and suddenly you're having fun. So I would equate that to switching genres and going into fantasy. So for me, it really took, 7 hours of reading or listening to this to finally accept everything in the world, to learn all the rules, to go all in. So I think if I have any advice for people that want to get into fantasy, it's like, just accept it immediately. This is the world, just accept the rules and, get all in, immerse yourself all into it. Okay, so book 2 goes into what happens at the end of book 1 is a really intense situation for Feyre, and that's where we pick off with book 2. And I don't want to say too much because I really don't want to ruin it for anybody, but she goes between worlds in the fairy realm. And this one, in this book, there's a newer character called Rysand. And I think you pronounce his name Rysand, but I like Rysand in my head. So that's another reason why I like to read books and not listen to audiobooks, because sometimes I like my own pronunciations better. But anyway, this one was great. It's longer. It's like 624 pages, I believe. And I read it in about a week, so I read about 100 pages a day, roughly. The parts that were more challenging for me, and sometimes I would skim them a little bit, like do speed reading through them, were the battles. And I'm never one, like if I go see an action movie and there's like a battle scene or anything like that, I really just tune out. I am not interested in wars and battles and all of that stuff. I really not interested. So sometimes it got tedious where it's like going through, all the challenges and the wars and the things that they have to go through. I like the relationships, the friendships, the interesting characters along the side. And there is romance in both of these books. So these are romantic fantasies, and they are not for children, okay? Because the steam and the spice level is quite high. Like when there is romance, it's very intense. It is not, PG-13. It's like rated R, okay? And I think that can be confusing for people because they look like fantasy books, like about dragons and things like that children would like, but they are not for children, okay? So I just wanted to say that as well. But all in all, I am really enjoying the series. It took me a while to get into it, but then I finally did. It clicked. The characters are interesting. Like, I actually can't wait to see what happens in book 3. I am going to take a break though and read like 2 more mysteries, and then I'll get back into the series. So that's another tip. If you like to switch your genres, you can. I feel like sometimes people think, oh, I've started this series, now I have to read it until the very end. But you don't. You can take a break and you can read a different genre and come back to it renewed. I feel like every reader has such a personal journey, and everyone has like a little different way that they like to read. And there is no right or wrong. I just love that they seem to be reading more. I saw an article stating that Barnes & Noble is opening up so many new stores, which is wonderful for me to hear. I love bookstores. I actually used to work at Barnes & Noble when I was really young, and so I've always loved it there. So just to kind of transition now into how to read more, because people ask me this all the time. Like I mentioned, there's a lot vying for your attention. There's social media, there's YouTube, there's Netflix and sports and all sorts of things. But if you would like to get into the habit of reading more, what I would recommend is scheduling it into your planner, like literally scheduling it into your day. And you could say, I'm going to go to bed 1 hour before I plan to fall asleep, and I'm going to read for that 1 hour instead of scrolling on your phone or, watching TV or anything like that. So you could schedule it into your planner. Another thing is to read at the same time each day. So some people say they can't read before they go to sleep because then they'll fall asleep like right away. And that's true. That sometimes happens to me as well. This might be TMI, but I like to read in the bath as well. So I take a nice hot steamy bath every night, and I always have a book with me, and I will read in the bath for at least 20 minutes. So that's one way that I read as well. And basically that's it. So it's going to be about finding times where you can just sit down and read. If you get yourself in a good book series, then you're going to look forward to it. And that time that you sneak away where you can read is going to be so just delicious and special for you. One more thing I wanted to share with you. I haven't told anybody this except for a few close friends. It's odd that I had so much resistance to reading fantasy books about fairies, because I love fairies, as you know, and I have written an epic fairy poem. I mean, this poem is in several parts. I've been writing it over the course of several years, and I have like a few chapters to go with the poem because it's very long and complicated. There's lots of lore in it. So I find it very odd that I had so much resistance to reading books, yet I am writing a epic fairy poem myself. It is a dream and a goal of mine to publish that one day. So somehow we'll make this happen. It's funny because as an author, when you've always written one type of thing, sometimes you feel put in a box. So sometimes I feel put in the box of like the nonfiction lifestyle genre, but I have many other interests. And I love, I love poetry. I write a lot of poetry too. So I love poems. And one day I do have aspirations to publish all of those. So anyway, I just wanted to have this bookish chat with you, and I would love to know your thoughts on all of this. What is your favorite genre to read? Do you like to switch genres, or do you stick to the genre that you read? Have you read the ACOTAR series? What do you think? Try to put comments without spoilers down below so that people, if they read them, it's not spoiled for them. And I would love to hear from you. Before we go, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my free author newsletter. I send out one newsletter a month. If you go to jenniferlscott.com, enter your email in the top left-hand corner and click subscribe. It's totally free, and I write to you once a month. This is taking place of my blog for now. All right, everyone, thanks for joining me today. Keep calm and continue reading, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.